Hi, and welcome back to the Godot community. My name is Sahira Dean. I'm the virtual PLC lead for high school 2D art. In this webinar, I'm going to show you some examples of some journals that my students have created. At the end, I'm going to share some of the tips that I've learned just throughout this whole journaling process. So here is, this is actually when I first started teaching journals back 13, 14 years ago. So I was always intrigued by just journaling, just because it exposed students to other ways to create, allowed them to experiment with different media and materials and layering and writing. So it always intrigued me. But I think when I first started teaching it, some of the compositions were a little awkward. They were collaging, they were writing, but it all always didn't really come together and make sense. So my goal was to, continue teaching. So I kept going, kept experimenting with different ways to present it to my students, and I feel like the outcome got better. This entry right here had to do with students choosing a social political topic. So this student was talking about poverty and, just the presentation of the journal on a sheet of graph paper, I thought was really interesting. So she had the words, come together in some kind of typography design, which was very, very interesting. Another student here, and you can see like the composition, like the words are there, but they're not really coming together to make sense. And again, this is, me as a, first, second year teacher, teaching this new idea. And here's another, which I thought he did a really interesting job of burning the paper and then placing the text in those negative spaces. So one thing we did on journal days, which I took a journal day, we'd have one once a week. Usually it was every Thursday or Friday, depending on block scheduling and what was going on. So they had one day a week that was guaranteed, and the expectation was that they would take it home and work on it outside of class. What I started doing was bringing my journal in and working with them. And so I would move around from table to table, especially with students that were kind of struggling with ideas, and just kind of help, just talk to them about, oh, I really like what you're doing here, or maybe have you looked at this artist? Let me show you this technique that I'm doing in my journal. So it provided a conversation for students, me and students, to just kind of bounce ideas off each other, and it was successful. This is actually cardboard, and she went outside and actually used sticks to gather and create this little tree. And then I think this was another social political. This one, they had to recall a dream. So this was a nightmare that she recalled, on these particular ones. I cannot honestly remember what this was. I know one year we had to do some type of family tree idea, but I'm not sure if that was that one or not. Here's another group of examples. This student actually, her personal artwork was one that showed, well, she was a student that believed in aliens, and I'm not sure, I wonder if she still does, but every artwork she would do would have some type of alien, kind of feel to it, some kind of unsearched land or far off land. And she was also a really great writer. So this idea really intrigued her. So she was one that always took her journal home. She was always working in it. And it became something that she actually incorporated into her later work, just this whole style of incorporating her writing with her imagery, which I thought was really cool. Here's some more examples, and you can see these are maybe into year 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5. The compositions are getting a lot more exciting. And what I did was take a lot of pictures of students working, of their final journals, and I kept like a bank of images to show students for the next year. One thing this did for my program was it excited other students that were not in the art classes. So when they would see students walking around with their journals, because after making their covers and personalizing them and actually spending so much time in their journal, they started carrying it around with them, showing other students, and other students became intrigued. And, it was like, I want to make one. So, that would also raise numbers and interest in my particular classes, which was really cool. Here's some more examples. Now, this is, kind of a typical work day. What I would do on some days was just pull out all the bins, right? So we had these white bins just full of materials. And I would just allow them to create. Now, if you have like a closet that you don't allow students, or that you don't mind students going into, where you keep all your materials, just that could be a day where you just open the closet, as long as the understanding is that they'll put it back when they're done, allow that to happen. Or maybe you want to limit them at first, or certain classes, and then other classes can have that kind of access. But also just letting students know that the materials are there, I think, for them to use and experiment with respectfully, is something that's really kind of exciting about a journal day. This is a year that we actually made smaller journals. So I put this in for scale just to kind of show they don't always have to be a big book, right? Here's some more examples, documenting travels. This was kind of a cool idea. She put the words in one orientation and then put the image in upside down. So I like that she was kind of experimenting with composition, experimenting with textures, right? And then just kind of a whimsical placement of imagery on my bottom right corner. Here's some more examples from students. What she did was create a pocket, and then she put like information about the journal inside that pocket. And in terms of grading, y'all, I'm a big fan of Post-it notes. So I showed the rubric in the previous webinar, which essentially is craftsmanship, composition, planning, and I think whether or not what they presented is in sync with the topic. But a lot of times I'll write notes on the Post-it note, feedback. I might draw on the Post-it note and just stick it onto their work. So, and this is the days before, digital submissions, which I'm a huge fan of now. But Post-it notes are always really cool. And sometimes students would actually put the Post-it notes in future journal entries, which was kind of cool too. Allowing pages to open up beyond the area that they're given inside the book. So she collaged in more paper, and that opened up. And then again, just experimenting with not gessoing over information in the background, but just, kind of taking the journal and working on top of it. This student here created windows also, so that actually opens up to reveal more information on the next pages. Here's another entry, and this actually does open up right here to another, I think it was like a stage or something like that under there, but this student is a musician. So he, a lot of his journals were about like concerts and creating music and things like that. So some tips I've learned throughout this process. Require students to use a technique. This will help them and really force them to experiment with something new. So maybe it's the image transfer, or maybe it's collecting sticks outside as opposed to using a paintbrush, or maybe they have to paint with their fingers. But definitely require them to use a different technique and experiment in their journal. It keeps them from being bored. It keeps you from being bored. And it just, it forces that natural creativity to kind of flow into their journals. Work with your students. And now this is kind of a controversial, I think, topic. Working with your students doesn't mean like every single day you're just working on your art. It's all about you. And when I say working with my students, it's more so like I'll bounce between tables. I'll show them what I'm doing. It becomes more like an open studio space on journal days or on some work days when they're heavily involved in their project. Um, so allow this time to be not necessarily just focused on you, but you and your students at exchange between teacher and student, kind of both working as artists. And then what this does too, it allows students to see that art, is a profession, right? So you're their art teacher, but you're also a working artist. You do actually, not kind of know what you're talking about, which we all have gotten that challenge from a student, but I think that's very important for students to see. Providing prompts ahead of time, so the homework sheet, giving that to them on the first day of class or when you first are presenting this topic, or even if it's 2 weeks ahead, I feel like that's not really enough time. I'm really a fan of doing the whole homework sheet for the semester or year and giving that to them because like I said before, it allows them to collect materials that they may want to use in their journals. Provide feedback based on growth and risk taken by the student. So if you're looking at all their previous journal entries and they're the same composition, same materials, same media, start, kind of calling that out. Have you thought about using this? Or, maybe look at this artist or, the composition looks very same or very similar on your previous 3 entries. What else could you do differently? But definitely providing constructive feedback based on their journals they've done is important. Encourage self-expression and voice, which is what journaling is all about. It's all about them and their particular voice. So their opinions matter to you and to, the creation of their work, right? So if they have a particular opinion, how can they create a work of art that reflects that particular opinion or research? And then definitely celebrate journal work days. So if you don't play music any other day in the week, but you only play it on journal days, or maybe you play a certain type of music on journal days, or maybe you bring candy, which candy can be taboo, or just some kind of special treat for students on journal days. Just make it a really exciting day. If it's a pretty day outside and maybe they have to do some type of observational drawing, maybe they take their journals and like a small art kit and work outside that day, right? So make it exciting and fun for sure. So thank you so much for being here. If you have not joined us on the Godot community, please do that. Join in the discussion, ask questions, interact with teachers from across the state of Georgia. But I thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next webinar. Bye, guys.